most expensive outboard repairs are not always caused by bad engines. Sometimes the engine was fine until it met fuel that was never meant for the way boats store and burn gasoline. And the trap is cruel. The station can look clean, the brand can be trusted, and the mistake can still happen because the danger is not obvious. It is hidden in labels, in timing, in how pumps are set up, and in one kind of fuel that people buy thinking it is a bargain. So before you top off for your next run, answer this. Would you bet your weekend, your tow bill, and your powerhead on that nozzle? Today I am naming 10 station chains and the single red flag that makes each one a risk, and some of these will shock even careful boaters. Number 10. Exxon. The first mistake looks harmless because it comes with an official sticker and a promise that sounds modern. You pull in tired, you want to get it done, and the pump feels like the least dramatic part of the day. The trap is that the warning is printed right there, but it is written for drivers, not for boaters. At some locations under the Exxon sign, you will see gasoline promoted with higher ethanol content, sometimes framed as a smarter value blend. If the label suggests 15% ethanol, or it implies a newer blend is the default, that is where many marine owners get caught. Many outboard manufacturers recommend staying at or below 10% ethanol. And plenty of fuel hoses and primer bulbs on older rigs were never built with higher blends in mind. Even when the engine seems fine at first, higher ethanol content can change how fuel behaves over time, especially in tanks that vent, sit, and heat soak. What makes this chapter maddening is how delayed the consequences can be. A boat might start clean at the ramp, idle smoothly at the dock, and still develop a rough edge once it is asked to hold steady load. Owners describe it as a small surge, a hesitant mid-range, or a warning tone that appears only when the hull is working. It is easy to blame spark, sensors, or bad luck, because those are the parts people can picture. Fuel is invisible until you drain a separator into a clear jar and see what the boat has been drinking. Most boaters assume the danger ends once they read the label and pick the right blend. It doesn't. Some of the most expensive mistakes come from things you never think to check, because the station looks clean, modern, and trustworthy. The problem only shows up later, when the engine is already under load and there is no easy way back. That is where the real traps start to appear, hiding in plain sight. Number 9. Chevron. The forecourt is tidy, the branding feels premium, and the whole setup suggests consistency. You do not see puddles, you do not smell fumes, and nothing looks neglected. The hazard here is not dirt. It is convenience built into the pump. At some stations carrying the Chevron name, the dispensers are designed to serve multiple blends through a single hose and nozzle. That flexibility is a win for road traffic, but it creates a small uncertainty for boaters. The first portion of fuel in the hose can reflect what the previous customer selected. If a nearby option includes a very high ethanol flexible fuel blend, or if the island offers multiple ethanol percentages, the shared hose volume can matter more than people assume. On a large built-in tank that you burn quickly, that first portion is diluted. On a portable tank, it is a different story. This is where small outboards become the surprise problem. A kicker motor or a portable outboard may run for months on the same gasoline, especially if it is only used as a backup. That means whatever you bought, including any small blend inconsistency, has time to absorb moisture, separate, and age. Through temperature swings, it can start fine in the driveway and then stumble when the boat is pitching and the load is real. This is why portable tanks and backup motors get people in trouble. The fuel does not just get burned, it gets stored, breathed, and reheated over and over until small inconsistencies become real problems. You do not need to panic, you just need to respect how little mistakes grow when fuel sits. Because the next red flag is not hidden in chemistry at all, it is sitting right where your hand goes. And you can spot it before you even read a single sticker. Number 8. Shell. You can learn a lot about a station in the first few seconds before you read a single label. The hose tells you whether the place gets attention. The nozzle tells you whether someone cares about leaks and mess. At some Shell locations, everything is crisp and maintained. At others, the island looks tired. Stiff hoses, dripping nozzles, sun-faded stickers, and grime that has been there long enough to become normal. None of that proves the gasoline is contaminated, but it is a reasonable clue about priorities. If the nozzle spits foam, If the flow feels inconsistent, or if the handle drips onto your hand, treat it as a warning, not an annoyance. Those little details are how you avoid being the test case for someone else's maintenance schedule. Fuel problems almost never arrive as a dramatic moment. They arrive as a slow confusion. A water separating filter fills faster than usual. A clear sample jar looks slightly cloudy. The outboard idles well at the dock, then develops a rough edge when you ask it to hold steady load. Owners start swapping spark plugs and chasing sensors because those are tangible. Meanwhile, the real clue is sitting in the separator bowl. A mechanic will often describe it with a sentence that sounds too simple. The pump is part of the product. If you would not bolt a cracked fuel hose onto your boat, do not buy gasoline from a station that treats its own hoses like disposable junk. This matters even more on modern engines with sensitive fuel delivery, where small amounts of water or sediment can clog filters and upset injectors. The safest decision is not heroic. It is choosing the station that looks like someone still checks it every day. Because offshore, you do not get to call a pause and reset. After that, time becomes the enemy, not grime. But wait for a moment. If you are watching this with a boat in your driveway, do me a quick favor and comment one thing. What outboard are you running right now? And have you ever had a bad fuel scare? Even if it turned out to be something else, tell me the symptoms you saw first, because that is what everyone recognizes in the moment. And if you want more videos like this, hit like and subscribe. Number 7, Circle K. Late night fueling feels efficient. You want to beat the morning crowd, so you stop on the way home, fill up, and tell yourself the boat is ready. The trap is that the store can be busy while the pumps stay quiet. At certain Circle K locations off the main road, the pattern is easy to see. People come in for snacks, drinks, and ice. Few people actually fuel, especially outside rush hours. Low turnover is not a guarantee of stale gasoline, but it increases the odds that fuel has been sitting longer, and ethanol-blended fuel can become more complicated with time. Boats amplify that complication because their tanks vent, because they sit through harsh heat cycles, and because water vapor is part of life near the coast. The most frustrating part is that the failure does not always show up right away. You can launch, run all day, and never suspect a thing. Then, the next weekend, the outboard cranks longer than usual, or it starts, but it will not hold a clean idle, or it surges at mid-range like it is searching for fuel. And the problem comes and goes just enough to make you doubt yourself. A lot of boaters recognize the moment when the engine clears its throat, runs fine for a minute, and then stumbles when you push past idle. That pattern is where low turnover fuel starts to look suspicious. Low turnover fuel rarely announces itself on day one. It shows up later as hard starts, mid-range hesitation, or that on and off stumble that makes you doubt your own ears. The fix is boring but effective. Build a short list of busy pumps you trust, and stop treating fuel like an afterthought. Now, what makes the next one sting is that it feels like a smart decision in the moment, and you only realize what you traded away after the money is already in the tank. Number 6, Atlantic Richfield Company. A cheap fill feels like a win, especially when everything else in boating costs more than it should. You glance at the price sign and tell yourself you just bought a little freedom. The trouble is that the real cost of bad fuel is not the fuel itself. It is what happens after. At stations branded Atlantic Richfield Company, the identity is often tied to value. That does not mean the gasoline is poor. It can mean the customer mindset is rushed. When you are focused on price, you stop noticing the details that matter. Unclear ethanol, labels, worn pump hardware, or a delivery truck sitting in the lot. You also tend to fill bigger because the whole point was saving money. And now you have put more uncertainty into your tank. Here is where the drama begins. And it is not mechanical at first. When an outboard starts acting strange, the owner looks for someone to blame. The station points to the pump certifications. The dealer points to filters and maintenance. Fuel problems are notoriously hard to prove after the fact, because the symptoms overlap with other failures. A weak ignition component can feel like fuel starvation. A clogged tank vent can mimic a failing fuel pump. A sensor can trigger warnings that look fuel-related. That ambiguity turns a simple problem into a fight, and fights cost time, money, and weekends. Value stops are not the enemy. Rushing is. When price becomes the only filter, you stop noticing the small signals that would have warned you to slow down, read, and choose differently. The cheapest fill is only cheap if it does not buy you an argument with a dealer and a weekend of troubleshooting. And the next trap is even worse, because it is built on comfort. The place looks safe, the crowd makes you relax, And that is exactly when people stop checking the one detail that matters. Number 5. Costco gasoline. This stop looks like safety because the evidence is visible in the crowd, lines of cars, constant flow, and no sense that fuel is ever sitting still. That comfort can be dangerous because it makes boaters stop paying attention. At Costco gasoline pumps, turnover is usually high, and that is a real advantage. But turnover does not protect you from timing. If a tanker has recently delivered, the underground tank can be stirred, and whatever normally settles can be suspended for a while. Look for cones, wet patches near fill covers, or a tanker just pulling away. Even if you missed it, you can sometimes catch a sharp, fresh odor hanging near the island. Those are cues to slow down. Most systems are designed to handle normal conditions, but boats are not normal customers. A car burns fuel quickly and masks small issues. A boat often stores fuel, then asks for steady delivery under heavy load. And that is where small problems become noticeable. Many owners fill the main tank and then fill a portable container for a kicker motor, assuming the backup will always be ready. That portable fuel often sits in a garage, heats during the day, cools at night, and breathes with humidity. Weeks later, when the main engine has a hiccup, the backup is asked to save the day. If the backup stumbles, you learn the truth. Small engines do not fail because they are weak. They fail because the fuel was stored like an afterthought. High turnover helps, but it does not cancel timing, storage, or the way boats amplify small fuel issues. The moment you fill a portable container just in case, you have created a slow test that runs in your garage for weeks. If you want a reliable backup, you have to treat its fuel like it matters as much as your main tank. Then there is a place that feels like it should be the safest of all, because it is literally built for boats. And yet, it can still set you up with a problem you do not see coming. Number 4. ValvTect marine fuel. A dock pump feels like the safest place to buy fuel because it is surrounded by the very machines it is supposed to serve. The staff speaks marine, the hoses are heavy duty, and everything about the scene suggests it was built for boats. That is why problems here feel like betrayal. At marinas offering ValvTect marine fuel, the quality can be excellent, especially when the dock is busy and fuel moves constantly. The risk is the quiet season. When traffic slows, fuel sits in a humid environment close to water, and temperature swings encourage condensation. None of that guarantees contamination, but it shrinks your margin. If a tank does pick up water or sediment, you are already on the water when you discover it, and that changes the stakes. There is also a subtle misconception that trips up experienced people. Ethanol-free does not mean problem-free. Ethanol-free gasoline can reduce certain storage issues, but it does not prevent water intrusion, it does not prevent debris, and it does not replace maintenance. A marina can sell ethanol-free fuel and still have problems if housekeeping is inconsistent. Because you rarely get perfect visibility, your best tool is behavior. Ask simple questions without turning it into a courtroom. How busy has the dock been lately? How often do deliveries arrive? Do they monitor for water? You may not get precise numbers, but you can learn whether the staff takes the question seriously. If anything feels off, take a small sample in a clear jar and look for cloudiness or layering. If the fuel does not look right, you do not need an argument. You need a different plan. Even when the fuel source is designed for boats, outside forces can still change the risk overnight. Sometimes the problem is not the pump, the blend, or the brand at all, but the ground it sits on. Number 3. Mobil. After a storm, the world can look normal again long before the hidden systems are normal. The roads dry, the skies clear, and people go back to routines. Underground infrastructure does not always recover on that same schedule. At some Mobil stations in low-lying areas, the warning is not the pump, it is the terrain. If the forecourt sits lower than the surrounding road, if gutters hold water, or if you can see a tide line from recent flooding, you should pause. Tanks are engineered to be sealed, but seals age, vents exist, and maintenance varies. Water intrusion is rare enough that most people ignore it, and common enough that mechanics have stories. The uncomfortable truth is that you usually do not know until after you have already filled. Boats make the consequences sharper. A car that runs rough can limp home and get checked later. A boat that loses smooth fuel delivery under load can put you in a bad situation quickly. The outboard might idle fine, then surge when the pickup finds a pocket of water, or when the separator fills faster than normal. You might feel the engine hunting at mid-range. You might turn back early, hoping the problem disappears before the run home gets long. A grounded post-storm habit is simple. Change your fueling behavior for a few days. Choose higher ground stations when possible. Avoid places with obvious standing water patterns. buy smaller amounts, and burn them quickly instead of topping off for storage. Check the water separating filter and drain it if your system has one. None of this is a guarantee. It is risk management, and risk management is what separates a calm boater from a boater who becomes the lesson. Environmental risk is easy to underestimate because it fades visually before it fades mechanically. By the time everything looks normal again, the conditions below the surface may still be settling. Number 2, British Petroleum. The easiest disaster to avoid is the one that happens in front of you, with a giant truck and hoses connected. People see it and still fuel anyway, because it feels normal. Normal does not mean low risk. You watch the driver close a fill cover, the sharp odor lingers, and you tell yourself it is probably fine. Probably is not the standard you want offshore. At stations marked with the British Petroleum sign, fuel deliveries follow the same basic physics as every other delivery. A large volume moves in fast. Turbulence stirs the contents, and whatever has settled can be suspended for a while. Modern stations often have systems intended to reduce that, but the safest approach is not to argue about engineering. The safest approach is to let things settle. Outboards are less forgiving because their fuel systems are often sensitive, and because the consequences arrive under load. Sediment can accelerate filter loading. A loaded filter can make a pump work harder. A strained pump can deliver inconsistently. Inconsistent delivery can feel like ignition trouble or like a sensor problem, and owners start replacing parts because parts feel like progress. Meanwhile, the real fix might be draining fuel, replacing filters, and starting over, which nobody wants to do after they have already paid for a full tank. The boating version of this lesson is simple. If the tanker is there, leave, come back later, or fuel at a different stop. If you arrive right after the truck pulled away, you can still choose caution. Buy less, burn it soon, and do not fill storage containers. This is not fear, it is strategy. A lot of experienced owners never talk about this rule because it sounds too basic, but basic rules are often the ones that keep you out of the worst situations because they reduce the odds of having to troubleshoot on the water. Now, most of the rules so far require patience. The final mistake comes from pressure. It happens when people are rushed, watched, and unwilling to slow down long enough to be certain. Number 1, Sunoco. The most dangerous pump is the one that forces you to guess while other people are waiting. You are in a hurry, you are thinking about the ramp, and you do not want to look unsure. That social pressure is how careful boaters make careless choices. At some Sunoco stations, the labeling is modern and clear. At others, the pump face is cluttered, stickers are faded, and the wording assumes you already know the local blend situation. You can become uncertain about ethanol content or about what the buttons actually select. The danger is usually not malicious. It is a rushed assumption. Here is why this earns number 1. When you buy a blend you did not intend to buy, you rarely discover it right away. The outboard may start and idle fine, because idling is forgiving. The symptoms appear when the boat is loaded, and the engine needs steady fuel delivery. A stumble when you push past idle, a surging mid-range, a warning tone that comes and goes, or an engine that feels hot and unhappy even though it ran fine last trip. Fuel problems also create a specific kind of denial. People do not like admitting they guessed. They tell themselves it was probably the standard blend. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes the decision begins a slow decline that shows up later as hard starting, rough idle, or filters that suddenly load faster than they ever did before. Because the delay exists, the story becomes hard to trace, and hard to trace problems become expensive. The discipline is simple. Never pump boat fuel from a dispenser you do not understand. If ethanol information is unclear, leave. If the button layout is confusing, leave. If staff cannot tell you what blend you are buying, leave. That is not dramatic. It is the kind of boring boundary that keeps you from learning the lesson offshore, because engines do not run on intentions. This list is not about good or bad stations. It is about recognizing the conditions that quietly turn fuel into a risk for boats. If you have ever had an outboard surge, hesitate, or throw an alarm after a fill, leave a comment with what you noticed first. That pattern helps other boaters catch it earlier. And if this video helps you avoid one bad decision at the pump and one ruined weekend, hit like and subscribe. I am building more practical outboard breakdowns that save time, money, and trips.